Welcome everybody to the Arlington Heights Memorial Library program, How to Tell Your Company's Story. My name is Diane Malik, the Business Services Advisor at the library, and I'm joined by my colleague Rosa, who will be with us as well. All right, time to get to the good stuff. I am pleased to introduce you to our presenter, Beth Mueller. Beth has combined her marketing degree with business strategy and creative writing to help companies communicate for more than a decade. She is the founder of Discovery and Story, where she gives free resources and tips to help small business owners take their communications to the next level. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth now. Beth, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Diane. I am so excited to be here with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to show these. Okay. Can everyone just give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? See the slides? Perfect. Thank you. So thank you guys so much for taking an hour out of your day to spend time with me during this class. This is a topic that I am so passionate about. From my own story, which I'll give you a little bit of an insight into in a moment, I loved helping people to discover and share their stories and figure out the best way to connect with the audiences that they want to. So a little bit about me. I actually decided when I was in the second grade that I wanted to be a writer. I was in Mrs. Carcello's second grade class, and she was reading to us from the book Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. And I can still remember that rough red carpet beneath my hands and my legs, and just hearing this poem that she had read out loud called Invitation, and just getting goosebumps on my arm, and just thinking, I had no idea that words could actually do that to you and could make you feel so many different things. And so my love affair with words really started then and has been with me my entire life. So I earned a degree in marketing, and then I got my master's in creative writing and in teaching creative writing because I wanted to be able to combine this kind of love for words and stories with actually helping people tell their business stories. So since then, I have been doing that for about 15 years now, helping companies of all sizes, as well as individuals, just figure out what their stories are and how you tell them in the best way possible. So really excited to take what I've learned in that time and walk you guys through some frameworks and some ideas and some inspiration to help you tell your company's stories. So when we're done with this class, my goal is that you're actually going to walk away with your core business story. And that's going to explain who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring. And this is a story that you're going to be able to use everywhere. So your website, social media profiles and posts, email campaigns, your elevator speech, answering the question, so what do you do? And so many more uses. Basically, your core story is that single go-to description that you have that helps you tell people who you are and what you do and the value you bring, that you can then tailor for all of these different places and all the different audiences that you want to share it with. So this is really helpful for small business owners and entrepreneurs, if you work in marketing or communications for a company, or even for job seekers. If you want to understand how you tell your professional story when you are in interviews or making networking events, when you're just sitting next to someone and want to explain what you do and the value that you can bring, this is a really good framework to use when you do that. So even though I might not, talk specifically about job seekers, or if you work inside of a company, just know that all of these tips and resources can be used in those situations as well. So what we're going to actually cover in this class, we're going to talk about, we're going to talk a little bit about what that core story is. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that, but we're also going to actually spend some time brainstorming what makes your business unique, because I think that's something that we don't always take the time to do. And I want to make sure that we give you a little bit of time tonight so that you have an opportunity to do that. And you have a bunch of inspiration that you can use today when we're writing our story, but also later on when you're looking back on it. And then we're actually going to write our messy first draft. So have paper and pen handy if you don't right now. And then we're going to talk through, how do you make that sticky? So how do you make that story really stick out and be memorable in people's heads, so that in 6 months or a year, when they are facing a challenge, or when someone asks them, do you know someone who does X, Y, and Z, they think about you and your company. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some editing tips so that you can make it sound awesome. So I like to joke, you know, I write for a living and I help companies tell their stories, and my actual writing is probably about maybe 10% of my job. And then the rest of it is really editing and making sure that we hone it and tailor it and get it to the right place. So I'm going to talk through some of those tips for that tonight. And then finally, we'll talk through just briefly about how you adapt that story. So how do you take something that we write tonight and how do you put it on your website? How do you turn it into an elevator speech? How do you create a tagline for your company? Things like that. And then finally, we'll have some time for Q&A. So if you have questions throughout, feel free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A box. There will be certain points during the class that we'll do exercises. So if you want to unmute because you're having a problem or you have a question, feel free to do that. But just know that at the end, we'll also have time for questions so that I can help with anything that comes up. So with that, let's get started. So what is kind of this core story? I realize that kind of sounds a little jargony or a little bit made up. And like I said in the beginning, this is your basic go-to story for your business or yourself. And this is really important because humans are actually hardwired for storytelling. So using the devices that we're going to talk through tonight, you're actually going to stick out a little bit more in people's minds. And like I said, you're going to be more memorable because you're telling stories versus, you know, a very dry kind of corporate description or something that doesn't have a lot of life to it. So we just really have to figure out how to tell your story and what makes you unique and what are those stories that we want to unlock and share with other people. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So defining your story now, one of the benefits to it is that it's your single source that can guide all of your future content development. So you don't have to worry about creating all these different pieces for, you know, whatever comes up in the future, or if you're working on your website or you're going to speak somewhere and you have to share a bio with them. This is one thing that you can always turn to and then just quickly adapt it for all the different scenarios. And that's really important because the stat is a little bit outdated. So it was from 2017, which is obviously pre-pandemic. But at the time, more than 1 in 5 businesses said that finding time to market their business is one of their biggest challenges. And a little bit more about my backstory. The reason why I'm so passionate about helping small businesses in particular and entrepreneurs is that I come from a family of small businesses and entrepreneurs. My dad had a small business, my brother has a small business, my aunt has a small business. So I really had a front row seat to some of the frustrations and the overwhelm that they went through figuring out how do you do all of these different things and make yourself stand out. And so that's one of the real inspirations behind me starting Discovery and Story and really trying to help people do something to make this part of the work a little bit easier. So we're actually going to do an exercise. I want this to be really interactive, and I want you guys to actually leave here today with this messy first draft. So in order to do that, I want to brainstorm. We're going to take maybe about 5-ish minutes. And I'm going to put 5 questions up here. We're going to pop in just 1 second. There you go. And I want you guys just to take 5 minutes and think through these questions and what are they for your business? So what's your product or service or expertise? And again, if you're a job seeker who this is more about your personal story, that would be more focused on your expertise and the value that you bring. Who is it meant for? Who's your ideal customer or client or employer? How do you make their lives better or easier? How do you do it differently than your competition? What challenges do you help people overcome? And then how would you want your customer or client or employer to finish the sentence? So after I bought or hired or employed, I was able to blank. So let's take just about 5 minutes and just spend some time brainstorming on your own, your answers to these questions. I also have, Diane, if you don't mind popping the first link into the chat for me, I'd really appreciate it. So these are 5 questions. I actually have 20 other questions on the link that Diane is going to provide.
Well, can I cut in? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It would not let me copy them for some reason in the chat. And so I retyped them and I'm not sure, did they show up? Is everybody able to see them?
I don't think I'm able to see.
I was going to say, put in the chat if you want, if you want us to put the links in again. Maybe everybody has them.
We can see the links. Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that link will take you to about 20 other questions. If these aren't sparking any kind of inspiration for you, they're questions like, if you have employees for your company, who is the employee who's been there the longest? How long have they been there? Is there anything interesting about when they started, what they've seen? You can ask yourself questions like, what was the moment that I first knew that we were going to start this company, and what was that like? What do you think when you think about the future of your company in a couple of years? What are some of the stories that come to mind? What are some of the clients you've worked with that have been really funny? What are some of the projects you've worked on that went in unexpected directions? Things like that. So just really thinking through, what are some of the funny moments or the unexpected moments that you have that you could turn into stories potentially. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time so that you guys can do that. I will be watching the clock and I will let you know when time is getting down. So go ahead and work on that. And just feel free to unmute and ask any questions if you have them as we're going through. Another source of potential inspiration, I was just working with a client actually about their response during the pandemic and all of the changes that they've made and all the stories that they've surfaced from employees. And it's incredibly heartwarming what employees have done for each other. Right now, in this particular client that I'm working with really wanted to do a big show around that. So we did some videos for social media that they're going to share, just highlighting some of the small moments, but the bigger moments too, of just how people have come together and helped one another right now. So that might be another source of information or brainstorming for your stories. Okay, and we'll spend about 1 more minute. So if you guys want to think about any other stories that you just want to capture now, this will be a good time to do that. And these kind of notes that you're taking now are going to help us when we actually start writing your story. So that was about 5 minutes. Feel free to, sometimes if you're like me, you'll have inspiration, 5 minutes from now. So feel free to keep adding to this as we go through. But like I said, this was just really meant to kind of jog some fodder that we can use later on as we're actually starting to put our stories together. You're going to have your core story, but then you're also going to have all of these different stories that you can pull from to kind of reiterate different points or as you're connecting with different audiences. So I like to think about it like a refrigerator. And I open the fridge and this is the snack or the drink that I'm going to pull out because this is what's going to most resonate with the person that I'm trying to connect with. So it's always good to have a full fridge full of different stories that you want to use when you're talking to different types of people that you work with. All right, so want to spend a minute talking about basic story structure. This is going to be really important as we start putting our stories together. And this is something that I hope nobody has kind of nightmare flashbacks to English class, but this is something that's really basic and really embedded into most of the stories that we have. I promise we'll just spend a minute on it. I just want you to have this foundation for how most stories come together before we actually figure out how we write your business story. So most stories start with the main character, moving along their life. Everything seems really great. And then there's some incident that happens. So if we think about the Star Wars movies, the first Star Wars, when Obi-Wan Kenobi comes and meets Luke Skywalker, and that's that inciting incident. There's something that has changed everything. And then there's a journey, and our main character goes on a journey. So in Star Wars, he goes to train with Yoda. Like, there's all these different things that he does. I am mixing up my movies, so if you are a huge Star Wars fan, I apologize. My husband would be incredibly embarrassed of me right now. But you go on this journey, and then there's some kind of climactic moment. Something happens, it all comes to a head. This is the, live or die kind of moment. So in Star Wars, the navigation goes out, and he just feels the force, and he knows where to put, where to shoot the thing. Again, my husband would be so embarrassed of me, to blow up the Death Star, right? So there's something that it comes up to as a climax. And then you have some kind of falling action. So what is happening? How are you changed as a result of that climactic incident or moment? And then some kind of resolution at the end of that. So usually we like stories where our main character changes in some way. It could be for the better, it could be for the worse. But if you read a story and they came right back to where they were in the beginning, you're going to feel really dissatisfied as the viewer or the reader. So our stories, most stories follow this basic structure of an inciting incident, some kind of journey, there's some climactic moment, there's some falling action, and then there's some kind of change or resolution as a result. So that's great for movies and novels, but how can we actually use that to tell our business stories? So the main character is actually your customer or your investor or whoever it is that you're trying to reach with your story. It could be you, but my asterisk with that is that it can't be you if the story is just about how amazing you are or how amazing the founder of the company or the employees are. It's really just coming back to the customer or the investor or whoever your target audience is for your story. This is always about them. We want to put them in the driver's seat. We want them to see themselves in the story, because that's when we really make true connections with the people we're trying to connect with. So said another way, your story is really about the people who need your product or service, or it could be the people behind the company. And you'll see a lot of companies do both of these. And it's really powerful when you can do both in tandem. So you're putting that customer in the main focus in the story. And then you're also giving some of the behind the scenes. People tend to like how things are made or seeing how things come together and who the people are that are providing that service or that product. So these tend to work really well together. So I want to talk through 4 different types of business stories that I think work really well and that I have found. You're going to have other stories beyond these 4, but these 4 tend to do a really nice job and capture most kinds of companies. So want to talk through each of these, and I'm going to give you some examples of each of these in action so that these can be inspiring as you think through your own story. And so my goal as you're listening to me talk through these is just jot down any notes if something seems to really resonate, like, oh, this makes sense here, or I could tell this story here, or I could focus on this if I went this route. So just as we're going through, write down what makes sense to you. So the first type of story that I want to talk to you about is called the expert story. And this is really focusing on why you are uniquely able to help your customers do whatever it is that you do. Now, again, the story is not about you per se, but we're going to kind of in a backhanded way talk about you being the expert and the one that's uniquely able to position to help them with whatever the problem is. So an example of this is Jenny's ice cream. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jenny's ice cream, but Jenny, right, the name behind it, she is really integral to the brand and the story about this company. And so if you go to their website, they have I think a really nicely done kind of story talking you through who the company is and their mission and things like that. But they also include this really nice description of Jenny. And I'm just going to read through a couple parts of it and point out things that I really like about it. So Jenny's been making ice creams professionally for 2 decades. Before that, she studied art, worked in a bakery, and had a serious hobby blending perfumes and collecting essential oils. So one of the things that I think is really nice about that is it gives you a really good insight into who she is. And it also incorporates different senses. So we'll talk through this in a little bit, but when we want to bring our stories to life for people, incorporating the different senses is a really good and powerful way to do that because it helps people place themselves in the story. So by just talking about, blending perfumes and working in a bakery, that can help kind of evoke these smells, these really nice smells that people can kind of relate to. So Jenny founded the ice cream in 2002, her ahead of the trend vision using whole ingredients and dairy farm grass pastured cows rather than synthetic flavorings and commodity ice cream mix. So that right there tells you how she's different, right? And what her vision is and how she sets herself apart. Coupled with inspired flavors, sparked the artisan ice cream movement more than a decade before it would become a top food trend. And then she talks about some of the kind of accolades that she has gotten. So she's a James Beard Award-winning author of 2 cookbooks, and she's been recognized by Fast Company as one of the most creative people in business. So not all of us are going to have those kind of credentials, I realize that, but I just think it's really nice when you can work that in to your story when it makes sense. So the number of clients that you've worked with or the number of sales that you've had. So if you've sold, 10,000 units of whatever it is that you sell, things like that, can be really nice proof points to add to your story. This is also a really great example, I think, if you are joining this class as more of a job seeker and you're looking for an example of how you could position yourself as being really unique when you go on job interviews. Again, I like this as an example of that. One other example, I don't have a visual to show this, but I worked with a woman who, she was in the fashion industry. So she was doing all kinds of things in the fashion industry for a long time. She decided to get out of that and she started a business being a styling consultant. So she basically helped women figure out what their style was and helps them organize their closets and find the pieces that would make them feel, really comfortable and feel really nice. When she was working on that, she realized that a lot of the women she was working with had some mental issues around getting rid of clothes or, I can't wear that because, it makes my legs look too big or whatever the issues were. And so she actually was so troubled by all of this that she went and she got a degree in social work so that when she's working with her clients, she can help them kind of work through these mental issues while she's also helping them kind of feel really good with the clothes in their closet. So she offers customized packages then based on the kind of expertise that she brings, which really helps set her apart. So that's another way of really showing, really emphasizing the expertise that you have and helping tell your story in that way. So another kind of story that I want to talk through is the what I call the company is going to change the world story. So this is really focused on inspirational, painting a picture of your ultimate end goal. So how great are customers' lives going to be once they have the result that you hold, that you can help them with. So an example of this, I realize this is a huge company, Google, but I think they do a really interesting job positioning themselves, even though they're this behemoth company now, of really telling their story in almost a continuation of their beginning. And so if you go to their website, they talk about from the garage to the Googleplex. And the story starting, I won't read through this all right now, but if you go to the Google website and their about page, you can find this story. But really just talks about how Google was first kind of thought about. And it was two guys in college and what they wanted to do and what they wanted to accomplish, and how that vision and that aspiration has really shaped all the decisions that they made and where they're going right now. And so I think it's a really interesting example of showing this inspiration and aspiration being kind of the driving force behind the company itself. So another example of this would be a smaller business that I worked with that has it's not a travel agency. He was having a hard time trying to explain what he is. He's more of that friend who kind of has the expertise of traveling to all these different countries and exotic locations. And he kind of is that best friend that you want to call when you're planning your dream trip, because he just knows everything. So he actually helps different people plan their dream vacation, their once in a lifetime kind of trip. And the reason he did it and the story that we crafted for him was really around his inspiration for starting this company. He was in a job that he loved, but he was being burnt out from it. And so he decided to take this trip. He'd always wanted to go to Asia, and he planned this really nice trip, and he went. And he said from the moment he stepped off the plane, he was just hooked. And he loved that feeling and that experience of seeing everything and smelling everything and tasting the food. And the more travelers that he met, because he got really hooked on this, the more travelers that he met, the more he realized that they were making really simple mistakes that, you know, he's learned because he's done it so often. But, you know, you don't necessarily need someone to plan out your trip. You just needed to know kind of these simple inside information into having a really great experience. And so he's built his company around that. And so he does a really great job, and he has a lot of really great photos to help tell that story of, you know, he really, really wants to help people feel what he felt in that first trip. So painting that picture for them of you can have this incredible experience too. So that's an example of this kind of inspirational or aspirational story. Another example, another kind of story would be the humble beginning story. And these are all my terms for these kinds of stories. But sharing the challenges that you've overcome in launching the business. Sometimes this can be really interesting, especially if you have a good story to share here. So an example of this, if you guys are familiar with Pat Flynn, he really focuses a lot with entrepreneurs. He runs a blog called Smart Passive Income and a podcast and all kinds of things now. So, but one of the things that I really love about his story, he makes it so integral to every medium that he works with. So if you listen to, you know, let's say 5 of his podcasts, or you read 5 of his blog posts, you're going to come across his story in some way. He just really embodies it and really makes it part of everything that he does. And his kind of humble beginning of how he all started it was that he was actually an architect who got laid off in 2008 and said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And he found this kind of new way of working, and he really enjoyed it and he got really good at it. And then he wanted to help other people do that. And I think what's really smart about what he does and how he tells that story is that he knows that a lot of people who find him are probably in a similar position, where either they're forced to make a career change or they want to make a career change. And so he makes his story really relatable and really embedded into everything that he does, so that you feel really connected to him. So that's an example of kind of this humble beginnings, or why you started your company. And then the last kind of story that I want to talk through is the problem solver story. And this is really about showing customers how much better their lives are going to be as a result of whatever you sell or whatever service you provide. So an example of this would be Rover, which coordinates kind of dog walkers. And what I really like about them, you can see in the first paragraph. So whether you need in-home dog boarding, pet sitting, dog walking, or daycare, Rover connects pet parents with dog people who treat their pets like family. So they really know their audience and they know what the problems are that they are looking for. And then they take it a step further in that second paragraph. So Rover sitters are your rainy day dog walkers, your everyday belly rubbers, your tug of war players, your middle of the night pee breakers, because we get it, your dog is family. And when you can't be there, you can trust us to keep your dog happy, healthy, and sweet as ever. And I think that in just a couple of sentences, I think they get into a lot of the challenges that people have when they need assistance with their dogs. And I think it really speaks to their audience. I think it speaks to some of the specific challenges that they're looking for, and really shows how they are uniquely positioned to solve that, is in their third paragraph, because they say it's not just about, loving a dog or being a dog person. It's also an award-winning technology business committed to making pet care safe, easy, and affordable so that everyone can experience that unconditional love of a dog. So again, I just like this as an example for a couple of reasons. I think that they really paint that picture of that challenge and what they're going to help their customers overcome. But then I think they also do a really nice job of using words that dog owners would use, right? So they're speaking to their audience. They're showing off their personality. They're really making this something that isn't, just kind of their ordinary kind of dog sitting service, right? They take it to a next level. So I like it for that reason too. So these are kind of the 4 story types that I think are really applicable for most companies. Like I said, there's also other ones. If you are someone who does a lot of philanthropy or any volunteerism, things like that, that's always a good story to tell. The founder story, we talked about the Google example for that. There are lots of other kinds, but I just wanted to show these as kind of inspiration for you in helping tell your story. And that's actually what we're going to work on now.
Beth, can I break in with a question we had in the chat?
Yeah, please.
Okay, Bill had a question. Would the Jenny Bauer type of story be useful in the summary on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think once you have that go-to core story, I think that is what you want to put everywhere. So I think it goes on your LinkedIn profile. I think it goes in your bio. I think it goes anywhere that you can incorporate it. We want to be really consistent and we want to use every opportunity that we have to tell that story. So absolutely, I think that's a really great way that you would incorporate that. So great, thank you, Bill. So we're gonna take some time now, and I want you guys to actually write out your messy first draft of your story. And I want to emphasize the word messy. So I think if anyone else in this group is a perfectionist like me, I think when you are staring at that screen or that piece of paper, I think it can be really, really overwhelming to think about how am I going to write this story. And so our goal right now is just to be super messy and just get the thoughts out, get the words out. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about making it sound pretty. We just want to get the stuff out there, and then we'll edit it. We'll make it sound pretty, I promise. But so what we want to think about is our main character. We want to introduce them. So that's our customer. And you don't actually have to name the customer, right? So the examples that we talked through didn't do that. But you always want that person in that scene to be kind of your focus. And remembering the 5 senses, if you can incorporate those in, that would be great. And then we want to describe that journey that they go on and then state kind of what the resolution is after they work with you or buy your product, something like that. And then always we want to include a call to action in our stories. We don't want to just tell a story to tell a story. We always want to include something, go to my website to learn more, follow me on social media, give me a call. I would love to talk to you more about what I can do for you. Anything like that. We just want to include some kind of call to action in our stories and figure out what makes sense. Now, like I said, I think it can be pretty overwhelming to just have me say, go and write your story. So I actually, I know this is a lot of words. So the second link that I had put in there, Diane, if you don't mind making sure that's in the chat again, thank you. So these are some kind of story starters that I have come up with for each of the 4 types of stories that we talked through. So these are meant to be kind of fill in the blank to get your brain going about what makes sense. So if the expert story kind of really resonated with you and you think that would be a good fit for your company, you can use this blurb to really kind of fill in where those gray boxes are and start with that. And then you would obviously kind of tweak it and make it your own. But this is just my way of giving you something to start from versus just that blank piece of paper or that computer screen. And so in the chat is a link. You can actually, this is a PDF on my website. So you can actually have the PDF so you can blow it up and make it bigger. But just wanted to keep this up here as inspiration for you guys as you're thinking through this. We're going to take probably about 7 minutes to just think through your messy first draft and just write your messy first draft. My goal would be that you would not stop writing that whole time. So just whatever comes to mind. And like I said, it could be, it could not make sense to you to start, but it will eventually kind of, as you think about it and as we edit it down, it will start to. So I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. I'm going to stop talking. But if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or type it into the chat. And I would love to help you with that. So with that, go ahead and get started. You can also combine kind of multiple stories together. So if kind of 2 of these are really speaking to you, feel free to pull elements from different ones and kind of create your own story. I'm trying to be helpful in providing frameworks, but obviously this is a really creative exercise. So take it to whatever level makes sense for your company. About 3 more minutes. About 1 more minute, and then we'll move on. For those of you who joined us right at the top of the hour, I shared with you a little bit of my story about how in 2nd grade, that was when I first fell in love with words. And what I shared with you guys is my core story, and it's all over kind of everything that I do. So when you actually kind of go, I usually start with that story about being in 2nd grade, and then I go into kind of some of these details that you're seeing here about kind of who I am and what I do with my company. So that's another kind of way to do this, is to start with some story that you think kind of solidifies or exemplifies what it is that you do, and then kind of go into more of these nuts and bolts. So as you keep working with it, that's an option. All right, so I'll give you about 30 more seconds if you guys want to finish up the sentence that you're working on, and then we'll keep going. And like I said, this is going to be your messy first draft, and then we'll work on kind of refining it. So feel free to keep working if you want. I'm conscious of the time, and I just want to make sure I can get through all of the points that I wanted to make tonight, and then happy to answer questions or kind of work with you guys further as you guys need help. So one of the things that I want to talk about is making your story sticky. And what I mean by that, as I mentioned in the beginning, is we want to create a story. So our brains are hardwired for stories. So just by doing a story, and incorporating those story elements, we're already going to be ahead of our competition because that's going to make us stick out a little bit more. But the way that you can really amplify that is by adding emotion and personality to your story. So emotion, if we can trigger in our customer an emotion, they will always remember what it is that we're saying. It just, for whatever reason in your brain, that's just how it works. And so a really great example of this is Gillette's Trio razor. They, I won't share the video with you. It's on my website if you guys want to see it. I have a link to it. But they did a really interesting video about a man caring for his dad who's aging. And the story talked about how there are so many razors that have been invented through the years, but never one for a caregiver or somebody who's actually helping somebody else shave. And if you just think about that act, right, it's very intimate, dangerous, right? You have a blade close to someone's cheek or their neck. So it was a really beautiful story, the way that they pulled it together about, the specific son caring for his dad and how much his dad meant to him, and then how he loved giving him a shave and how it was so much easier now with this razor versus what he had been using before. So that's one example of emotion, but there's lots of different ways that you can do that. Also personality. We want to make sure that you're using your words. So even if you use that story starter that we just went through, you want to tweak it so that it sounds like you. And one of the best ways to do that is just to say it out loud, especially saying it to, a family member or a friend who you're close to, who's going to give you a real honest opinion if it sounds like you and sounds authentic or not. You want to incorporate your personality whenever possible. That's also going to help you stick out and be memorable to folks. And then I also want to talk about editing really quickly. As I said before, I think writing that messy first draft is about 10% of what I do, and then the other 90% is editing it. I want to talk about 4 kind of common mistakes in business writing that I come across pretty commonly. And when you're going back and refining your story, just take a look. If you're using jargon, that might be appropriate depending on the audience that you're speaking to. But if you can cut it out, and if it makes sense to cut it out, then I would try doing that. I always call it the kind of grandma test, or I personally have some young kids, so the kid test. If I could explain it to them, then I can pretty much explain it to anybody. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Number 2, a lot of people tend to repeat the same words. So you can, even if you're in Word or Pages or whatever program you use, if you do like a find for a word and you kind of see all the different places it pops up, thesauruses are your best friends, and just come up with a couple different ways to, a couple different words to use to replace some of those, and your writing is going to sound so much stronger. Number 3 would be using too many words. A lot of times when we're speaking, the words might be a little bit more jumbled, and then when you're writing, it's a little bit more concise. So what I mean by that is, if I'm writing my elevator speech, I'm going to allow a little bit more of that. But if I'm writing, a bio for LinkedIn, for example, I'm going to keep it a little bit more concise because I know someone's probably scanning it and quickly reading it versus kind of hearing me speak it and bring that element to it. And then lastly, making really long, complex sentences. If your sentence goes, 3 or 4 lines, that's probably too much. So just seeing if you can break that into smaller sentences. And then lastly, I want to talk through making your story adaptable. So once you have this kind of core story of who you are, what you do, and the value you bring, you can adapt that same story so that we're being really consistent to your tagline, to your bio, your company description, your About Us page on your website, your elevator speech. So, the next time you're sitting next to someone on a plane, the next time that we fly, and they ask, what do you do? You can have this answer about really simply what it is that you do and why you're valuable. So it's that one go-to message that you have that you can really use in a variety of different places. And you just want to tweak that ever so slightly for those different uses. And then you might even, like I said with my fridge example in the beginning, when I have a whole fridge full of stories that I can pull out depending on the audience that I'm working with. So I might start with my core story, and then I might pull out a different story that emphasizes one particular element that I'm really trying to emphasize with that group. All right, so I want to make sure that I leave enough time for some questions in case you guys have them. So really excited that you guys spent today with me. Thank you so much for taking the time to really think through and figure out what your story is and a way to tell it. So my hope is that you have this really killer go-to business story now, realizing that it's that messy first draft that you're going to have to keep kind of working with and refining to get it to really sound authentic to you and be the way that you want. But thank you guys for taking this class and being here tonight. Keep me posted and have fun with it. And if you want, I would love to help you. My email address is right there. It's beth@discoveringandstory.com. If you want to share with me your draft, I would love to provide feedback or answer any questions that you have.
I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank you, Beth. That was great.
Yeah.
So much good information. Just wanted to thank everybody again, and I hope that you guys have a good rest of your evening.